3 days ago, the European Space Agency released what it called the most detailed image ever taken of the mysterious interstellar visitor known as 3I Atlas. For months, anticipation had been building across the world. Astronomers, journalists, and space enthusiasts were counting down to this moment. The moment humanity would finally get a clear look at the object that had been drifting through our solar system, glowing faintly green and behaving unlike anything ever observed before. Billions of dollars had gone into preparing for it. 7 orbiters around Mars had been strategically aligned for a once-in-history opportunity to capture high-resolution data from multiple angles. Space agencies hyped the event for weeks, promising the clearest look yet at a true interstellar wanderer. But when the image finally dropped, the world fell silent. What appeared on screens wasn't the breathtaking portrait. Everyone expected it was a blurry white speck lost in a field of stars. No structure, no shape, nothing that even hinted at what the object actually was. Within minutes, social media erupted in outrage. How could amateur astronomers using backyard telescopes capture sharper images of distant comets, while billion-dollar orbiters equipped with state-of-the-art optics returned something that looked like a camera glitch? NASA, ESA, China's Tianwen-1 mission, and even the UAE's Hope orbiter all went quiet at the same time. The official reason was data verification, and the US government shut down a convenient explanation for why the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, equipped with the most powerful space camera ever built, suddenly had nothing to share. But people weren't buying it, especially because, in less than a week, 3I Atlas would vanish behind the sun, completely invisible to every telescope on Earth during the most critical stage of its journey. By the time the first wave of disappointment settled, frustration had turned into suspicion. Astronomers demanded answers. Influencers accused agencies of hiding the real photos. And all across social media, a single question began circulating. What are they not showing us? The disappointment made sense when you looked at the numbers. The ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter, one of the main instruments pointed at 3I Atlas, has an angular resolution of just over 11 microradians per pixel. At a distance of 30 million kilometers, that translates to around 340 kilometers per pixel, far too coarse to detect any fine detail. Considering that the object's nucleus might only be between 5 and 46 kilometers wide, it would appear smaller than a single pixel on the sensor. In other words, the blurry speck wasn't a failure, it was a limitation of physics and optics. The instruments were designed to study the Martian surface, not capture faint interstellar objects gliding millions of kilometers away. Nick Thomas, the principal investigator for the Cassius camera, even admitted it openly. The comet is around 10 to 100,000 times dimmer than our normal targets. Still, that didn't stop the public backlash. People felt misled. The ESA had promised a moment of revelation, not another mystery. And when NASA, the agency, everyone expected to deliver the real image, stayed completely silent, frustration turned into something darker. Theories began to spread that there were other photos, better ones not meant to be seen yet. It didn't help that Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb published a short but pointed note on his website the same day the ESA photo was released. He mentioned that NASA's higher IC camera aboard the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter should have captured images with up to 10 times the clarity of ESA's equipment. We are all hoping the higher IC team will release their images as soon as possible, he wrote. 2 days later, still nothing had been released. The explanation that the government shutdown had paused communications didn't add up. ESA had managed to publish their findings, China and the UAE hadn't. All 4 space programs silent at the same time regarding the same object. Coincidence or coordination? The speculation spread faster than any official statement could catch up to. Forums and live streams filled with arguments. Some believed the agencies were simply taking time to process and calibrate the data properly. Others insisted something extraordinary had been discovered, something so strange that governments agreed to hold it back until they understood what they were looking at. And then came the amateurs, while the agencies stayed silent. Backyard astronomers began pointing their own telescopes toward the same patch of sky. One of them, a Portuguese astrophotographer, known online as Dobsonian Power, captured an image that would ignite the internet. His setup was basic: a solar telescope, a simple digital enhancement workflow, and a lot of patience. What he posted, however, was anything but ordinary. Inside the faint green coma surrounding 3I Atlas, he claimed to have detected dim geometric structures, angular shadows that seemed to form lines, like panels or edges. His caption was short and haunting: "What on earth is it?" The image went viral within hours. It spread across Reddit, X, astronomy forums, and Discord servers. Some viewers were convinced they were looking at something mechanical, a vessel, a probe, maybe even a fragment of technology. Others dismissed it as digital noise or over-processing artifacts. The truth was somewhere in between. Solar telescopes aren't built for deep space imaging, and aggressive noise reduction can easily generate patterns that look like structure. The brain sees order in chaos, a phenomenon called pareidolia. Yet there was something unsettling about this image. Dobsonian Power wasn't a random conspiracy account. He had years of verifiable astrophotography experience, fully documented hardware, and a track record of accuracy. He didn't claim to know what he was seeing. He simply promised to repeat his observation when 3I Atlas reappeared in November. Still, within a single day, multiple science news sites published near-identical articles debunking the image. Their tone was defensive, almost coordinated. They dismissed the entire incident as misinterpretation, reminding readers that AI-based upscaling and noise reduction can fabricate shapes out of nothing. Yet as more users tried to enhance the ESA's original photos themselves, something interesting happened. Some enhancements looked exactly like the official release: blurry, indistinct, unremarkable. But a few, processed through independent AI models trained on raw space imagery, began revealing subtle shapes, consistent, faint, and too symmetrical to ignore. The debates grew louder. Was it a software illusion? Coincidence? Or had the agencies underestimated what was actually hiding within that glowing haze? By the 48th hour after the ESA's photo release, no one could agree on anything. Not the size of the object, not its shape, not even whether the image was real or fabricated. The internet was split into two opposing worlds, believers and skeptics, both drowning in an ocean of reprocessed pixels and algorithmic ghosts. One thing, however, was certain. The story of 3I Atlas was no longer just about a comet. It was about what happens when truth, science, and secrecy collide in the age of instant global scrutiny. And this was only the beginning. Asterisk. 2 days after the blurred ESA photo dropped, the silence surrounding 3I Atlas deepened. No new data, no official statements, nothing from NASA, ESA, or China. For an event that was supposed to be one of the most documented celestial encounters in history, the quiet was deafening. Scientists who had once been eager to talk suddenly refused interviews. Scheduled live streams from observatories were quietly postponed. And when journalists reached out to NASA's Public Affairs Office, they received the same short, automated reply: due to the ongoing government shutdown. External communications are temporarily limited, but the timing was too perfect. For many, it felt less like an administrative hiccup and more like a digital curtain being pulled across the most watched object in the solar system. Still, a few voices within the scientific community couldn't hide their frustration. A European astronomer, speaking anonymously to a space forum, claimed that the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter had, indeed, captured usable data of 3I Atlas, sharper than what ESA released. But that internal review, teams were delaying publication pending further verification. His comment was deleted within the hour. Meanwhile, amateur networks were lighting up. Dozens of backyard telescopes from Portugal to Chile to Japan began comparing notes. Many of them noticed something unusual. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a typical comet anymore. Its brightness wasn't following the expected curve. Instead of flaring up smoothly as it neared the sun, it was flickering, pulsing in intensity every few hours, almost rhythmically. Some said it was just outgassing jets of sublimating ice venting from its surface as it warmed, but others weren't convinced. The intervals were too regular, too precise. Then, late on October 8th, a faint signature appeared on a solar observatory feed run by an independent European research station. It showed what seemed to be a narrow beam of material ejecting from the comet's side, not spreading in all directions like normal gas release, but streaming in a straight line, almost like a focused jet. The feed was quietly removed the next morning, replaced by a data integrity notice. That was when speculation hit a fever pitch. Forums flooded with theories. Some believed the object had fractured, splitting into smaller fragments as it passed near Mars. Others went further, claiming that the beam was propulsion, evidence that 3I Atlas wasn't a natural body at all. Among the thousands of posts, one stood out. It was from a user on 4chan's science board, claiming to be part of a contracted data processing team for ESA. The message was short, cryptic, and quickly deleted, but screenshots spread before it vanished. It read, "You've seen the dot. You haven't seen what came after. They're holding it back until it's past the sun. Trust me." You'd question what's real if you saw the raw frames. It was dismissed by many as an obvious fake, the kind of anonymous rumor that thrives on the internet. But others weren't so sure. The wording was too specific, too calm, and eerily confident. As October 9th arrived, the world was left in a strange kind of limbo. Scientists were silent. Space agencies were hidden behind bureaucratic walls, and the public was left piecing together a mystery from half-truths and shadows. Meanwhile, the object itself, the one at the center of all this, was growing brighter, much brighter. The Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, began to detect its signature even from its far-flung orbit. What caught analysts off guard was how abruptly the intensity of reflected light increased, not gradually, but like a light being switched on. Within a span of hours, 3I Atlas's glow intensified by nearly 20%, for an object that should have been following predictable thermal physics. That didn't make sense. Avi Loeb wrote again on his public blog, this time more cautiously. He acknowledged the growing anomalies, but warned against jumping to conclusions before the data has been verified. Still, between the lines, you could feel his unease. Nature, he wrote, has a way of surprising us, but surprises only frighten us when we lack transparency. The lack of transparency was exactly the problem. By then, amateur astronomers had noticed another pattern. Every few hours, as the light flickered, subtle variations appeared in its spectral readings. It wasn't random. It looked patterned, like a repeating modulation. Faint but measurable. Online communities started calling it the heartbeat, a periodic, repeating pulse in the comet's brightness that seemed to defy natural explanation. Scientists dismissed it publicly, saying the data likely came from interference or software errors. But privately, even seasoned professionals admitted they'd never seen anything quite like it. As the world argued, the clock kept ticking. 3 Atlas was fast approaching perihelion, its closest pass to the Sun. Once it crossed that threshold, it would be hidden behind the Sun for nearly 2 weeks, completely invisible from Earth. Whatever it did in that time, no one would see it. Was the perfect moment for something to happen, and for no one to be able to confirm it. Across forums, whispers began connecting the dots. The synchronized silence from 4 space agencies, the rhythmic flicker in the data, the missing NASA images, the vanished observatory feed. Individually, they might mean nothing. Together, they painted a picture too strange to ignore. Theories became headlines. Headlines became panic. For every scientist trying to calm the storm, 10 new videos appeared online suggesting the opposite, that something monumental was being hidden from humanity. And then, on the evening of October 9th, something even stranger happened. The ESA's main live telemetry feed for Mars, which had been running uninterrupted for weeks, briefly went offline. When it returned 20 minutes later, the official explanation was scheduled maintenance. But buried within archived data logs, independent researchers noticed a timestamp anomaly, a tiny gap of just under 30 seconds during which the telemetry data jumped ahead in sequence. Nothing major, except that, in those same 30 seconds, one of the instruments monitoring 3I Atlas's brightness registered a sudden, sharp spike, the highest value ever recorded. The reading lasted less than a second before it normalized, dismissed as a glitch. But when plotted across several independent sources, the same spike appeared. Again, identical in shape and timing. Something had happened. Something real. But by the next morning, every dataset showing that spike had been quietly pulled from public access. The ESA called it a synchronization error. NASA, still silent. 3I Atlas, meanwhile, continued its silent journey toward the Sun, glowing brighter than ever, pulsing with that strange, deliberate rhythm, as if announcing its presence to whoever might still be watching. And, for the first time, even those who mocked the early speculation began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, something extraordinary was unfolding, not in a distant galaxy, not beyond the reach of our instruments, but right here, within our own solar system. Whatever 3I Atlas truly was, humanity was about to lose sight of it completely, and once it passed behind the Sun, only one question would remain. When it reappeared, would it still be the same? By October 10th, the world's telescopes had already begun to lose sight of it. The Sun's glare was swallowing 3I Atlas, burning it from view like a flame-consuming paper. Within 48 hours, it would be completely invisible from Earth. No ground-based observatory could track it. No camera could pierce the brightness of the solar disk. It should have been a routine phase in a comet's life cycle, a brief disappearance before re-emerging on the other side of the Sun. trailing vapor and dust. But this time, no one was treating it like routine. The silence from official channels had hardened into something heavier, something like dread. NASA remained offline. The ESA's updates grew shorter, colder. China's Tianwen-1 orbiter, which had been transmitting steady telemetry for months, suddenly switched its feed to encrypted mode. Even the UAE's Hope mission, normally active on social media, went quiet. For the public, it felt like the entire solar system had gone dark at once. That's when the leak started. On the evening of October 10th, a file began circulating on private Discord servers and encrypted chat groups. It claimed to contain unauthorized telemetry from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. 3 raw images, supposedly captured just before the communications blackout. The files spread fast, faster than anyone could contain them. Within an hour, they had made their way to Twitter, Reddit, and Telegram. The images were grainy, distorted, riddled with compression artifacts. But beneath the noise, a strange shape could be seen. Not round, not diffuse. It looked elongated, angular, like a shadow caught mid-turn. Almost immediately, the images were declared fake. Metadata, inconsistencies, impossible camera settings, mismatched timestamps. Every red flag was there, but the damage was done. People had seen it. The narrative had already shifted. The idea that 3I Atlas wasn't just a comet had escaped containment. Every space-related subreddit turned into a battlefield. Scientists tried to explain orbital mechanics and optical illusions. Conspiracy theorists responded with diagrams, overlays, spectral comparisons. One user even lined up the leaked image against a render of the interstellar object, Oumuamua from 2017, and the match was unsettlingly close. The next morning, #Atlas revealed trended worldwide. News anchors used words like unconfirmed and alleged, but every segment ended with the same haunting image, that blurred, cigar-shaped silhouette. Governments issued statements urging caution. The European Space Agency released a single, tightly worded tweet. No new verified images of 3I Atlas have been released. Please disregard unconfirmed sources. It didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. By October 11th, a sense of global unease had set in. For decades, the idea of extraterrestrial intelligence had been abstract, a curiosity, not a threat. But now, it felt close, tangible. The public didn't know what 3I Atlas was, but they knew what they were not being told. Meanwhile, inside professional circles, the debate turned desperate. Astronomers compared notes from every available observatory before the blackout, trying to reconstruct what had happened in those final hours of visibility. What they found only deepened the mystery. The object's trajectory had shifted subtly, but measurably. Instead of following the exact gravitational curve predicted by standard models, 3I Atlas was off course by a few thousand kilometers. Not much, but enough to raise questions. At first, scientists blamed outgassing jets of vapor pushing the object slightly off path. It was the same explanation used for Oumuamua's odd behavior back in 2017. But the direction of deviation didn't match the comet's observed spin. The math didn't add up. Somewhere, something was exerting force that shouldn't have been there. Then came the strangest report of all. A handful of amateur radio astronomers from Japan, Italy, and the US claimed they'd detected a faint signal emanating from the same region of space where 3I Atlas was last seen. a narrowband emission near 1420 MHz, the same frequency associated with hydrogen and, coincidentally, the one used by Satya to search for intelligent life. The readings were weak, barely above background noise, but they were regular, pulsing every 88 seconds. With eerie precision, mainstream science dismissed it as interference. But to a public starved for answers, it was something else entirely. Proof. Podcasts exploded with theories. YouTube channels dedicated to astronomy turned overnight into investigative hubs. Commentators compared the alleged signal to the legendary WOW transmission of 1977, the mysterious burst of energy that had baffled scientists for decades. Some even suggested 3I Atlas and the source of that signal could be the same thing. It was speculation, of course, but speculation with momentum. And while humanity argued about what might be hiding behind the sun, something else was happening. Space weather monitors picked up an unusual solar event. A minor flare, nothing catastrophic, but the pattern of radiation was strange. Instead of dispersing evenly, as solar flares normally do, this one appeared to refract, bending slightly, as if hitting something massive and partially transparent. For a brief window, it created what researchers later described as a localized lensing distortion. To put it simply, the sun's light had bent around something it shouldn't have. It lasted less than a minute, then vanished. The data was logged, flagged as instrumental anomaly, and promptly archived. By October 12th, 3I Atlas was gone, swallowed by the sun's brilliance. The world waited, breath held, counting down the days until its reappearance. Somewhere in the silence of space, that pulsing signal continued, faint, steady, unblinking, and as it slipped behind the solar curtain, one question echoed across every news feed, every message board, every sleepless conversation on Earth. If it wasn't a comet, what was it doing here? By mid-October, the comet that had captured the imagination of the world was gone. Hidden behind the sun, 3I Atlas had slipped beyond visibility. For the first time in months, the night skies were empty, but the unease on Earth was not. Astronomers filled the silence with analysis. News outlets replayed the same simulations. A green object curving behind the sun, engulfed in plasma, soon to reappear. But what most of the public didn't know was that something else had begun to surface. Something buried, encrypted, and not meant to be found. On October 14th, an anonymous post appeared on 4chan's X board, the same board notorious for urban legends, false leaks, and hoaxes. The message was simple, written in blunt text. ESA, servers compromised. Internal Archive 3, IATLAS, perihelion sequence. Check timestamp, the 11th of October 2025_UTC, frame 11:26. Below the text was a download link, posted from an untraceable IP routed through multiple countries. Within hours, it spread across Reddit, Twitter, and encrypted Telegram channels. The file, barely 12 megabytes, contained a short, silent video feed, allegedly captured from ESA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. Just before its cameras switched to maintenance mode, the footage ran for exactly 47 seconds. It showed a small glowing object moving near the limb of the sun. Its trajectory smooth at first, until frame 11:26. Then, in one jarring instant, the glow fractured. A sudden flare erupted, not from the sun, but from the object itself. Frame by frame, the shape distorted, elongating, bending unnaturally against solar radiation. The light expanded into a thin, symmetrical structure, almost like a pair of luminous wings or panels. Before the video abruptly cut to black, there was no sound, no metadata, and no confirmation that the footage was real. But to millions who saw it, the implications were devastating. Was this the moment 3I Atlas broke apart? Or was it something else, something activating? ESA denied the footage immediately, calling it digitally fabricated. But inside the scientific community, encrypted email threads told a different story. Several astronomers privately admitted that the raw data files for that same time window were missing from the official servers. Not corrupted, missing. Deleted manually. Then came a second leak, this time from a forum frequented by amateur radio astronomers. A user claimed to have accessed partial spectrographic readings from the Parker Solar Probe, the spacecraft currently orbiting close to the Sun. The readings, if real, were unlike anything ever recorded. During the exact minute the 4chan video's timestamp indicated, the 11th of October 2025, 1742 UTC, Parker's instruments had logged a sudden spike in electromagnetic coherence. The solar plasma, normally chaotic and random, had briefly synchronized into structured pulses to the human eye. It would have looked like a flicker of organized light, a pattern, not a flare. The phenomenon lasted 6 seconds. Then the data flatlined. When reporters asked NASA for comment, their official response was a single sentence: all Parker Solar Probe systems are nominal. No anomalies detected. But the internal logs, later leaked by whistleblower accounts, told a different story. The spacecraft had indeed gone into safe mode during that period, its instruments automatically shutting down due to an unexpected energy interference. For investigators, this was the first concrete clue that something about 3I Atlas was beyond normal astrophysics across the world. Theories multiplied. Some suggested the object had fragmented due to solar heating. Others proposed a more extraordinary idea, that it had reacted to the Sun, not melted, not broken, reacted. By October 16th, online forums were dissecting every frame of the leaked video, overlaying it with solar data, flare charts, and spectral readings. Computer modelers reconstructed 3D versions of the event, showing how the glowing body expanded before vanishing. Patterns began to emerge. The supposed panels were not random. They were geometric, aligned at nearly perfect 90-degree angles. That kind of symmetry was unnatural in cosmic debris, but characteristic of engineered structures still. Scientists refused to speculate. Dr. Alina Sato, a solar physicist at JAXA, spoke cautiously during an interview. The moment we assume intelligence, we abandon evidence. There may be physics here we don't yet understand. Her statement, meant to calm speculation, had the opposite effect. Within hours, #artificial comet trended globally. Then something happened that no one expected. On October 18, the Deep Space Network, a global system of antennas used to communicate with distant spacecraft, reported a brief, coordinated system glitch. For 2 minutes, every station across 3 continents experienced the same interference, a repeating carrier tone pulsing at regular intervals, identical to the mysterious 1420 MHz signal reported a week earlier. This time, however, the pattern contained a gap, a silent interval exactly 12 seconds long, repeating in perfect sequence. When the interference ceased, all systems returned to normal. The event was logged, time-stamped, and quietly classified as a synchronized anomaly. But among those who analyzed the raw data, one detail stood out. The signal's origin appeared to come from behind the sun, precisely where 3I Atlas was last located. It was the same direction, the same frequency, and it had returned. By now, the story had outgrown the scientific community. Governments began tightening control over information. Several observatories reported sudden restrictions on data sharing. Live satellite feeds were throttled. Independent astronomers in Chile and Australia reported unexplained system lockouts. When journalists asked why, they received the same vague explanation: solar interference, temporary maintenance, but no one believed it. The truth was spreading too fast to contain. Every leak, every fragment, every rumor added to a growing unease, a sense that something immense was unfolding in silence. By the end of October, 3I Atlas was still unseen, but it was no longer forgotten. Somewhere behind the sun, the object that had entered our system from interstellar space continued on its hidden path, silent, deliberate, and, perhaps, waiting, as one anonymous astronomer posted on a private forum that same week. Comets don't transmit. They don't organize solar flares. They don't go dark and come back synchronized. Whatever this is, it's observing us. For 2 weeks, the skies remained silent. Every telescope on Earth, every orbital observatory, every amateur astronomer waited for the same moment, the reappearance of 3I Atlas from behind the sun. Its trajectory had been precisely calculated. If it survived its solar pass, it should have emerged by October 27, 2025, re-entering visible space near Mercury's orbit. But when that date arrived, nothing appeared. No light, no tail, no trace. Days passed, and astronomers began to assume the obvious, that the interstellar visitor had perished in the furnace of the sun. They issued cautious statements: most likely disintegrated, thermal stress, standard outcome for volatile bodies. But privately, no one was certain. Then, on October 30th, an alert came from an unexpected source: a solar observation array in India's Ladakh region, operated jointly by a local university and Japan's JAXA team. At 3:11 UTC, one of its coronagraph instruments detected a faint, structured reflection emerging from the solar glare. At first, the data was dismissed as a software echo. Then the shape resolved. It wasn't a diffuse dust plume or a fragment cloud. It was sharp, deliberate, angular. Over the next 6 hours, additional observatories across Europe, Chile, and Hawaii confirmed the detection. A luminous object, roughly 240 meters long, reflecting sunlight in a consistent, rhythmic pattern, as if rotating with precise mechanical symmetry. Within hours, the global astronomy network was alive again. The comet hadn't disintegrated. It had changed. Images began to arrive from the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, this time verified and time-stamped. The object's albedo, its light reflectivity, was anomalously high, almost metallic. It displayed no outgassing, no vapor trail, no dust emission. It wasn't behaving like a comet. It was behaving like a structure. Spectral readings revealed something even stranger. Instead of volatile compounds like carbon or ammonia, the returning body reflected purely coherent light signatures, as if composed of crystalline alloys or highly ordered materials. The media exploded overnight. Headlines ran across every language. Every platform interstellar object reappears new form baffles scientists. 3I Atlas survives the SUN, but what is IT now? Television anchors spoke with rehearsed calm, but behind them, the graphics told a more unsettling story, a glowing, symmetrical object leaving the sun's shadow, spinning slowly in a path that was no longer following a natural orbit. Its trajectory was shifting, not outward, not downward, but lateral. It was turning. Calculations from the ESA near-Earth object program showed an impossible vector adjustment, a course correction of nearly 0.2 degrees, executed smoothly over several hours. The change could not be explained by solar radiation pressure, nor by residual jets. It was controlled movement. For the first time in history, an object of interstellar origin was displaying propulsion. NASA held a press briefing the next day. The tone was careful, clinical. We are observing a non-gravitational trajectory adjustment. The cause is unknown. At this stage, we are not classifying 3I Atlas as artificial, but the word artificial was all the public heard. Within minutes, speculation reignited. News networks replayed slow-motion footage of the object rotating, freezing frames on what looked like repeating geometric panels. Analysts drew comparisons to space probes, sails, even Dyson fragments. Meanwhile, social media dissolved into chaos. Hashtags like #AtlasReturns, #InterstellarProbe, and #SolarWitness dominated every platform. Some celebrated it as first contact. Others feared it as invasion. But those who studied the data saw something deeper. A pattern emerging in the object's spin rate. Its rotation was decelerating, not randomly in fixed, measured steps. Every 12 hours, it slowed by exactly 0.004 rotations per minute. It was as though the object were preparing to stop by November 1st. Ground-based radar in Puerto Rico and Australia began returning clearer silhouettes. The body was elongated, spindle-shaped with smooth, reflective ridges running along its axis. It glowed faintly green, not from emitted light, but from a halo of ionized particles surrounding it, as though static electricity were clinging to its surface. Then came the strangest discovery of all: infrared. Readings showed temperature uniformity. Every square meter of its surface emitted the same thermal signature down to the decimal. No natural object behaves that way. Artificial systems do. Privately, scientists at ESA began referring to it by a new internal name: Project Echo, a nod to the faint radio signals that had preceded its reappearance. The signals hadn't stopped. In fact, they were growing stronger. Deep Space Network receivers picked up the repeating 1420 MHz pulse again, but this time the intervals had changed. The 12-second gaps now carried microbursts, short, complex packets of modulated energy, not random noise, but encoded structure. In other words, data. For decades, CTI researchers had defined one clear metric for intelligence: the transmission of robust, repetitive, non-random signals. And 3I Atlas was doing exactly that. Governments convened emergency sessions. Security agencies classified the data. Military satellites were repositioned to track the object. For the first time, the world's superpowers cooperated in secrecy. No one admitted it publicly, but the term contact protocol began appearing in leaked memos. Still, the object remained silent in one crucial way. It didn't approach Earth. It didn't transmit toward us. It simply continued to rotate, methodical, deliberate, holding its course near Mercury's orbit, as if waiting for something. On November 3rd, A live feed from the James Webb Space Telescope captured the clearest image yet. There, suspended against the dark curve of space, was a luminous spindle of green-white light, rotating in calm defiance of every known law of motion. The surface glimmered with faint, symmetrical markings, patterns too precise to be random, too alien to be human. The footage lasted 19 seconds before the feed abruptly cut. NASA cited bandwidth saturation, but by then, millions had already seen it. The world no longer needed to ask if 3I Atlas had survived. The question had changed. Now it was, what has it become, and what does it want? By the first week of November, it was no longer a scientific curiosity. It was an event, a global phenomenon moving at the edge of the sun's gravity well. The object once called 3I Atlas had stabilized its rotation. It no longer tumbled or drifted. Instead, it held a steady orientation toward one fixed point in space. Earth at first, astronomers called it coincidence. But every calculation told the same story. Its rotational axis was locked on us, as if watching, behind closed doors. The world's communication agencies had already formed a joint task group. It included NASA, ESA, JAXA, Roscosmos, and the Chinese National Space Administration, a coalition that hadn't existed before and officially still didn't. They called it the Solar Alignment Committee. Their mission: decode whatever was being transmitted. The 1420 MHz signal had become persistent, stronger by the day. The 12-second intervals were no longer silence. They carried structured waveforms, repeating in binary-like modulation. To untrained ears, it was static, but to data scientists, it was language. The first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, a small research team at the University of Helsinki. Using an open-source algorithm originally designed to compress radio astronomy data, they discovered that the signal wasn't random at all. It was fractal. Each packet was a self-similar sequence, repeating across scales. A recursive design found nowhere in natural radio noise. In essence, it was transmitting information encoded like a living structure. When the team reconstructed the waveform into a spectrogram, a faint pattern appeared, concentric arcs, overlapping and interlaced like rings in motion. It wasn't text. It wasn't sound. It was geometry within 48 hours. Independent analysts confirmed it. The transmission carried a mathematical map, not a destination, but a framework of ratios, harmonics, and constants that mirrored those found in quantum hydrogen transitions. The message wasn't saying where. It was saying why. Governments moved quickly to contain the discovery. The Helsinki servers were seized, their data rerouted to secure European archives. But by then, the file had already spread. Astronomers from Chile to India had copies. It could no longer be hidden. By November 7th, public awareness of the Atlas signal had reached its peak. Every media outlet ran variations of the same headline. Scientists detect pattern interstellar. Object sending structured transmission. The White House and the European Commission released synchronized statements emphasizing no evidence of intent or threat, while intelligence agencies issued private directives to classify all high-frequency monitoring near Mercury's orbit. Still, the signal continued, calm, unwavering, and precise. Then, on November 9th, the unthinkable happened at 2:44 UTC. The Deep Space Network detected a second pulse, a narrow beam emission transmitted not from Atlas toward Earth, but from Atlas past Earth, aimed outward into deep space. The beam was focused, coherent, and directed toward a point beyond our solar system, the approximate coordinates of Epsilon Eridani, a star system 10 light-years away. The meaning was immediate and terrifyingly clear. Whatever Atlas was, it wasn't here to communicate with us. It was using us as a relay. Within hours, international observatories went into emergency coordination. The data confirmed it. The pulse carried the same fractal structure as the Earthbound transmission. Identical encoding, just redirected somewhere beyond the sun. An interstellar object had turned our system into a communications bridge. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the signal stopped. No fade, no interference, just silence. For the next 72 hours, the world held its breath. Atlas remained in position, reflecting sunlight, immobile, a silent sentinel hanging near Mercury's orbit. By November 12th, NASA released one final public statement. The object designated 3I Atlas has ceased all detectable emissions. Its current trajectory remains stable. Further updates will follow pending analysis. But internally, the Solar Alignment Committee had reached a chilling consensus. The emissions hadn't simply stopped. They had been acknowledged at exactly 3:22 UTC, minutes after Atlas went silent. 3 radio telescopes across different continents recorded a faint return pulse, originating not from Atlas, but from beyond the HELIOS-PHERE dot. It was weaker, delayed, but perfectly aligned with the direction of the outgoing beam. Something had answered. No one could decipher the contents. No one could confirm intent, but every analyst agreed on one point. The timing was impossible to dismiss. Atlas remained stationary for 5 more days, then began to move. Again, slow, deliberate, accelerating outward along a clean, parabolic path. Not toward Earth, not toward Mars, but away back into the dark between stars. By late November, its signal faded beneath detection limits. The last observation came from the Very Large Telescope in Chile. A final glimmer of green, light shrinking against the black, like a distant lantern retreating beyond reach. It left behind no debris, no radiation, no trace, only questions. In the weeks that followed, governments declassified selective portions of the data. Public opinion fractured between wonder and fear. Scientists debated whether to call it alien, machine, or natural. But one detail, quietly buried in the Helsinki team's original research, never reached the news. Hidden within the fractal patterns of the first transmission, beneath layers of repeating hydrogen constants, it was a single mathematical phrase, a ratio that, when translated into human notation, equated precisely to the speed of light divided by time. It wasn't a message of contact. It was a statement of observation, and as one anonymous researcher wrote in a classified summary later leaked online, it came here to look at us, the way we look at distant stars, briefly, from afar, to understand what we are before moving on. We were not the message. We were the experiment. The file ended there. 3 months later, the night skies returned to normal. But every now and then, a faint carrier tone still flickered across the 1420 MHz band, never long, never strong, but real enough to make instruments whisper. And every time it does, somewhere on Earth, a radio astronomer glances up, not to listen, but to remember, because sometimes the universe doesn't send visitors to speak. It sends them to observe, And when they leave, they take more than data with them. They take the silence that follows. When the object finally vanished beyond the heliopause, the instruments fell quiet one by one. No flare, no final burst of radio noise. Just an absence so complete that even static seemed hushed. For the first time in months, the world looked up at a sky that felt normal again. But normal had changed. You could sense it in the language of scientists, in the tone of evening news anchors who spoke softly now, as if afraid to break something fragile. Every space agency on Earth published its final report. None used the word contact. Each settled on the safer phrase anomalous interstellar encounter. The public wanted closure, but closure never came at Harvard. Avi Loeb's research team turned the last verified signal from 3I Atlas into a three-dimensional model. The pattern formed a lattice of spirals converging toward a single vanishing point. Loeb called it a map of attention as, if the object had been focusing on us, the way a lens focuses light. When asked what it meant, he paused for a long time before answering. Maybe it wasn't a message at all. Maybe it was simply seeing if anyone would notice. In Geneva, a symposium titled The Post-Atlas Era brought together physicists, philosophers, and theologians. The opening statement came from an ESA director who admitted, "We once believed interstellar space was empty. Now we know it can look back." No one applauded. They just listened. Amateurs kept scanning the hydrogen band. Most nights they found nothing, but once every few weeks a narrow whisper appeared, half a second of patent noise, gone before confirmation. Forums filled with screenshots and speculation, each new fragment rekindling the same question. Was it still out there? Meanwhile, nations quietly redirected funding. New deep space arrays rose across deserts and plateaus, built not to transmit but to watch to catch the next visitor before it reached the inner system. Astronomy had become surveillance. Curiosity had become vigilance. By the spring of 2026, the world adjusted to its new rhythm. Documentaries replayed the timeline, the blurred ESA photo, the missing NASA data, the 4chan leak, the pulse to Epsilon Eridani. Students memorized them like milestones. Textbooks rewrote the definition of a comet. Poets and filmmakers renamed it the Green Eye of God. But among those who had seen the raw data, a quieter consensus emerged. They no longer asked what Atlas was. They asked why it left so easily. Because if something could cross light years, arrive unseen, study an entire planetary system, and depart without trace, then maybe our silence afterward wasn't emptiness. Maybe it was being observed again, from farther away this time. On a cold December morning, the last official tracking entry was archived. The final line in the log read, "Signal loss confirmed. Object outbound on hyperbolic trajectory. No further anomalies detected." The technician who typed it hesitated before pressing enter. He glanced once at the spectrum monitor. At the thin horizontal band where the 1420 MHz trace had lived for weeks. For an instant, he thought he saw it flicker. One brief pulse, perfectly symmetrical. Then nothing. He smiled to himself, saved the file, and powered down the console. Outside, dawn was breaking. A quiet sky, a new day. And somewhere beyond the reach of our telescopes, a fragment of light kept moving, steady, deliberate, carrying with it everything it had learned about a small blue world that once looked back.